Warning: the following program may contain material not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
The borders of space and time have opened once again. And transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you. Wake up and remember.
On this episode of Let's Find Out, we're crossing the threshold between history and the supernatural to speak with a true explorer on all things haunting. Our guest's journey began in her childhood home in central Connecticut, in the town of East Hampton, where she experienced numerous paranormal occurrences. Now, these events were so notable, in fact, that they drew the attention of the legendary investigators, the Warren family, who came to investigate the house during her teenage years. She has spent extensive time in Ireland, a place rich with histories and hauntings, deepening her passion for Celtic cultures and rebellions, both Ireland and Scotland. She's also avidly studies early American history and wartime, specializing in the American Civil War and the American Revolution. All this plus more. Please welcome our new friend and first-time guest, author Courtney McInvale. Courtney, my friend, welcome to Let's Find Out.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Oh, I've been waiting for this moment for a while now. I think I emailed you a while back, and we get so busy with these things, with events, with signings, during shows, you're putting out books, that sometimes these emails get lost in the sauce, and then you return my emails like, I was so excited. Like, great, finally we get to have you on. And we're already 2026, 25 flew by so fast, and
I know.
But here we are, new year, new stories to share with our listeners. So I like to start on the way back machine. We're gonna go back in time.
Sure.
How all this started for you. And I know we covered it a little bit in the intro, but what was going on in your home back then? Now, because I know this started during your teenage years, but prior to that, was there any paranormal activity or history in your family?
Yeah. So I think when I think about paranormal and my introduction to it, I do think part of it's like genetic and family. Being from an Irish family, we are just sort of always aware of this sort of ethereal realm that's around us. And it wasn't ever a bad thing to talk about spirits and souls. And in my family, I did a lot of research and realized there were people who had been accused of witchcraft over the years, namely for talking to the dead, things of that nature. So there was always sort of this familial sense of there being something more. But growing up in New England, everyone kind of lives in old houses and has strange things. So I wasn't that abnormal. Being Irish Catholic in New England is super normal. So a lot of people would probably relate to that. When I was growing up, there would be small things that would happen in my childhood home. Flickering lights, creaky floorboards, a door that might open, swearing you heard someone in a room where someone wasn't. But my parents didn't want my siblings and I growing up scared. So they would always just tell us old houses do strange things. Don't worry about it. And so I didn't grow up really upset about any of this. It was just sort of, hey, this is a thing that happens. And I appreciate my parents for doing that, because I think sometimes if you breed this sort of environment of fear, it can escalate things. I also was raised by my mom, who was a teacher, and my dad, who was a history major prior to being a police officer. So they were very big on education and my love for history in my childhood. So that perfectly coincided with my future path. But when I was a teenager, the haunting activity really escalated. And I tell folks there's a perfect storm usually of events that you have when there's an extreme haunting, right? That's why some people can be at a certain house and live there and experience nothing, and another family will have this, really extreme activity, because it's more than just a property. It's the people in it, and then the times in their lives and what's happening in it and what's being brought in. And my dad was also running a business called Postmortem Cleanup. So he was cleaning up old sites of homicides and suicides as sort of an extra job when I was growing up. And he had been going through a lot of issues with depression himself. So I think all that energy surrounding his job and what was going on with him also sort of entered into our household where I'm becoming a teenager. I'm more angsty. My sisters are entering those years, just all this upheaval. And so we started to notice that there was a lot more energy and some of it seemed negative. And there were multiple witnesses to it. And when we started to have events that were just more shadow figures or an appearance of blood on the wall or things like that, my mom was very worried. She immediately called our priest and asked him to come to the house and bless the house. And he did, but he was pretty spooked. She then called a pastor. He didn't really believe in spirits. Some pastors believe just in demonic presences. He sort of thought, oh, well, Courtney has all these band posters and Grateful Dead posters on her wall. They probably summoned in a demon. Weird, obviously. So my mom removed my music posters and we remained haunted because they had nothing to do with it. And then finally, this ages me, but she took to what I call ye old dial-up internet, the ghostly internet where we had to use our landlines to use the internet. And she was on, AOL or something. And she was looking up people who help people in these situations. And she had found out about Ed and Lorraine Warren residing in Connecticut and being Catholic like her and specializing in this. And that sort of warranted her giving them a call. Then that's how they sort of entered into our lives.
You beat me to the punch. I was going to ask because it would take quite an interesting event in order to get the attention of the Warrens, but it's my understanding that they were very open to helping anybody. And so it was a matter of finding them on AOL, either an email or a phone call. And how was that experience when they came over?
Well, I will say this too about them. It's not that they would just go to anyone that would call. They would want to validate that you were telling them the truth. And I completely understand that because probably at this point in their career, they had clout chasers or people like that who were trying to stage things to get their attention. So they kind of had a checks and balances sort of system, and which I would agree with. Lorraine was really taking charge because Ed was pretty sick at that time. And one of the things she did was have a long consultation with my mother via the phone. And then she gave my mother some instructions to do with the house. And one of them was to tell the house that they were coming. And my mom kind of did. And it sounds kind of like kooky dooky, but she was like, hey, I've called and Lorraine Warren, they're going to come. And we noticed all the activity in the house really quieted after that happened. So Lorraine followed up in about a week or so after that, and she asked how things had been. And my mom said to her, well, I think whatever you did, whatever prayer, whatever you did from there must have worked. We're good. Thank you so much. And Lorraine was like, oh, honey, no, that means I need to come because they're trying to hide. They don't want us to come. Right. So for her, she kind of almost spiritually validated the experience. And then after that, they came to the home. And again, Lorraine was really taking the lead. She had family with her and she interviewed my mother and myself and my sisters. She took a tour of the property. She sort of got her psychic imprint from it. She really sat with me too and talked with me about my fear, the anger I had at my dad for stuff he was going through. She was just a very sweet person to me. And I remember that. And she was very sweet to my mom. And what happened after that is we had the opportunity to either stay or leave, but she encouraged us to leave while they were in our home, conducting the cleansing, and to take animals with us so that she could be most effective with expelling anything negative and that it wouldn't impact our energies or the energies of anything living. So us and our pets actually stayed at a hotel for a little bit. I think I was so embarrassed, and my mom was trying to keep things under wraps. She told our schools we were in Florida on vacation or something like that, so people wouldn't know that we have these ghostbusters at our house. And when we came back, Lorraine had left all her findings of the things that happened in the house, the negative and more benign entities she encountered, and what she had done to cleanse it. And then she also left the check that my mother had left for her. saying that they don't take money from people who truly need it. And based on her experience in the home, she knew that we were in need of it. And I always remember that too, when people sort of talk about the Warrens chasing money. I remember that moment as like, not if you legitimately needed their help. And I think that that speaks volumes about who they were.
And I think that happens to a lot of people who are, and I'm going to use this term, legitimate paranormal investigators, and to go and help people and to start getting well known. There's always people out there, or of course, we don't know, there's trolls that'll accuse people of, you're just doing it for the money, you're doing it to get famous, you're doing it to sell books, but this is not that case.
Right. It's not. And I get it. At that point in their career, they had all these really big cases. They had done Amityville, for goodness sakes. Like, they had lectures. I may not have known who they were as a teenager in a rural town, but they were known. And that's why they had to say that there were prices, there were things, there were reasons that they would have to charge. And they did say, it was this amount of money, but at the end of the day, they don't take that if you're actually haunted. It would be more like if you called them there and you had something staged to try and get them to talk about, then they might take your money for wasting their time. But when they saw that it was, my mom and dad had separated, my mom was there with 3 little girls, and we were just a scared family with bona fide paranormal activity, I think they just kind of were like, no, this is what we're in it for. And that's why they did what they did.
And what happened after they left?
So after they left, it did feel a lot better in the home. Lorraine kind of said it would feel like a brand new day. And it did. I felt like we were more peaceful. I still felt like there were presences, but not in a way that upsets me. More of like that comforting, oh, there's always someone watching out for you presence. But Lorraine did sort of warn us that one, we would always be susceptible to spirit activity for the rest of our lives because of the closeness with which we experienced sort of an extreme paranormal event. And because of who we were, spirits might more see us as a light, so that we would just more notice activity. And as I got older, I did always notice that I noticed things first, like a flickering light or a shadow or a sound. I was always more tuned to that. And that's okay. The house stayed pretty well until there was change again, which the Warrens did tell us about. So when I went to college and I moved out of the house, the activity started to increase again. My mother was thinking, I can't do this again. So she put the house up for sale. She moved into another home while it was for sale with my sisters, and the activity went haywire in the house. Stuff started breaking, curtains billowing, lights flickering. Neighbors were calling the police thinking someone broke in, because all of that change just sort of almost awoke whatever had happened there. So my mother did sell it 20 years ago now. To my knowledge, since that time, there have been at least 5 or 6 families have moved in and out. Some of them citing paranormal reasons, some of them not, because again, I think it differs with the person. I still think that was something that more or less always affected me in the sense of I wanted to understand how that all worked and how I could make a better connection with spirit going forward. So I always look back on that time now as something that was meant to be, that sort of propelled me into my career path.
Can you imagine the kind of conversation you'd have to have with a realtor?
I know. My mom didn't say anything, but then when the realtor called her because I want to say like the water heater had burst and the curtains were billowing and the neighbors were so worried. My mom was like, I didn't want to tell you about this. But they were like, well, legally we don't have to say anything. So
I was going to ask, I think, I don't know what state there actually, was there some sort of law that was put in to pass? You had to disclose it when I know you have to disclose when a house, there was a murder in a house, but I don't know about haunted.
I don't know. I've heard rumors that there are some states that say that, but I think that's so difficult because you would have to have credentials that it's haunted and people would be skeptical. Some people have suggested too that you have to have a record or disclose if anyone died in a home. But I think in New England that would be really hard because you have really old homes and odds are over hundreds of years, especially back before hospitals and hospices, people died at home. So it would be a strange thing to disclose in New England or in an old home. So I don't know how much people say those things and they're just not, enacted in real life,
Right. And not only in the homes, but in the land before the homes got there, because that's a whole different animal too.
Absolutely. Land carries energy. We know from all the indigenous people that were here prior to, Europeans settling over in America. We have thousands of years of people existing here, and our history on them is very minimal because they wouldn't have been writing in a language that we can understand. We understand the indigenous people that were encountered as far as Western Europeans documented them, but there's so much we don't know about their practices and their spirituality and their lives and the evidence we find of that all around us.
Absolutely true, especially now, because I know we're going to go into the history of our country with the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. That in itself is another can of worms we're going to be opening here very soon. So from the time you moved out of the house, you went to college, but for those in this kind of a path, it never ends. So where did you go next? Where did the paranormal take you next?
Sure. So I stayed sort of in my Irish Catholic roots, and I went to Catholic University in DC. I really wanted to get involved in history, but my mother, who was a teacher, was really worried about my limited career opportunities as a history major. She's like, you're going to have student loans to pay. So I actually, and this is hilarious, convinced her that a political major would be sufficient because then I could take all these history classes. Through that major, though, I was introduced to different government agencies, NCIS, FBI, Homeland Security, and I applied for different internships. And in college, I got an internship with NCIS doing cold case homicide, working for them. I also studied abroad when I was in college in Ireland. I was able to study Irish rebellion history and Irish culture. So all those sort of spiritual parts of me and fascination all sort of were able to come together in college, and I was able to immerse myself in all of these experiences that built upon what I already had, but the direction I was going. And then after college, all that experience helped me to get a job with the Bureau. So I was able to go through the FBI Academy as well, which taught me how to add rational thinking, corroboration, fact checking, all these things to my spiritual experience, which makes it more full when I'm out there investigating, writing, guiding. Now I have this practical sort of secular side that has mixed with the spiritual side I always had. And none of that would have happened if it weren't, all these different pieces coming together.
You said it perfectly, because in my mind, as you're saying this, and I know if you were to go on a paranormal investigation of sorts, different people have different tactics, but you're getting your training for more like a detective kind of thing.
Right. Putting puzzle pieces together. That's how I look at it, as when we're investigating. So when I know we always say, like, history, oh, someone died here, is it the ghost of so-and-so here? But I like to go a little bit deeper. I like to think about, okay, what time of year did it happen? What was the setting like? What time of day? What were they interested in? Was there music they liked? And then I like to put these sort of puzzle pieces together and see, is it at this time of day, or when this song is playing, or when someone who looks like someone they knew appears, that we have an unexplained activity? Is this something that we are getting proof that they see us, or are we seeing a slip in time because it happens at a certain time? I like to make sure that all these details from the history have some sort of corroborative effect with the paranormal part, because to me that makes it so much more powerful for us to say, yes, this is the ghost of so-and-so when they come by at this time, because this is what happened to them, other than maybe like we think it is. I like to put together the facts and say that makes it even stronger as a story.
And I think that makes your findings even more concrete, whatever it may be. It might not even be paranormal at all. It could be something completely different. And I don't want to get ourselves in trouble. So I'm going to try to be very careful how I ask you this question. Being, do you have experience on the government side of things without naming names or agencies?
Mhm.
During your time and experience with these different entities in the government, what is their feeling of paranormal? Because I know, I'll give you an example. Like when I'm at work, eventually people find out what I do. It takes time, but sometimes people come in your office, have a conversation. Oh, and by the way, when I was a kid, these little stories start creeping in here and there. Was that your experience there?
Yeah, I would say there were all kinds of different people. I think you kind of think that everyone in the government is one way, and there's not. So you will find your peers who are fascinated as well and intrigued, and other independent thinkers. But they also, in the government, in my opinion, sort of like they also know who they're looking for. And I think I am just this very anomalous individual with my personality. And I was trying to figure out who I was. So I was adapting to whatever. And I remember in the FBI Academy, they had us take a personality test, right? Like one of those Myers-Briggs sort of thing. But it was the extended, like bona fide version to figure out like who you were. And in my entire FBI Academy class, I was the only one in my personality type. And I think that shows too, especially because mine was more about being perceptive, things being not inside a box, things being less defined. And you'll find most government workers do see things in a more black and white way. That helps them to be more efficient. That helps them to check boxes, make sure they don't get in trouble. There's nothing wrong with that. But I almost think that there's a little bit of like ambiguity, like, oh, if you're not in those boxes, what are you going to bring to our attention, right? So I did it more discreetly. I always felt I had a strong intuitive sense, but I always used that, again, with something that I could back with fact. My intuition might lead me in a direction to research, but that's not something I can document in a paper, right? But if it leads me to the direction where I find something that's factual, that supports what I need in that case, then perfect. So I kind of was very discreet, as I think other intuitive people were as well.
Wow. And I know sometimes you have to tread carefully when you're at work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I get it. With the government, you do have to have your boxes checked. You have to have things a certain way. This is what runs our country for everyone. You can't have this, maybe this girl felt this thing. And I understand that. But if you can, tune into your intuition and help that lead you to the facts, by all means.
True. And, and it's well documented if people want to research it on their own, where in the last, I'm going to say several decades, where the actual government does do experiments, which involve sometimes supernatural type of, I don't want to say, I don't know why I say seances. Why does I keep seances? I don't know why. It's from another show.
Well,
but
the CIA
I'll say
did
experiments.
that,
yeah.
Right? Like where they were testing, I want to say it was almost like like I call it traveling, but it's like astral projection. They were studying that.
Yes.
And, sort of the multidimensional realm. And I think that has been really fascinating, that a lot of CIA documents have really said like that these things can't be disproved, and there are certain things that do happen. And I just think that shows more about the power of the human mind, is we know there's more that it's capable of. I think we use 8% of our brains, right, on a daily basis. So that doesn't mean that other 92% is just sitting in our noggins doing nothing, right? Like there's something happening. We just aren't either awakened enough or in tuned enough to understand what it is comprehending and where it's existing. And I think the government knows that too. So in a way, they would love to find those answers.
Yeah. That reminds you of the movie. What's it called? Limitless, where somebody invents a pill that it releases just 100% of your brain.
Oh, really? I haven't seen it.
Yeah. Was it David Boreanaz in it, or one of those Ben Affleck looking guys? But the movie was really it's a really good movie, actually, as a potential of what your brain can do from the help of a certain drug,
Right.
releasing the 100% of your brain. And I'll be first in line for that. Now, we're talking here from your college years, from your time with the government. when did you decide to become an author? Because you have an awful lot going on there now, and then now you started writing books.
Yeah.
And no, which I love the subjects of what you're writing about. But when did you decide to start writing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when I was little, I wanted to be a writer. My parents ingrained in me a great affection for books and writing and reading. As much as I was fascinated by my government work, didn't feel like I was made for it. I was not good at a 9 to 5 or going to an office every day and commuting. And I knew that. And I had an assignment where I transferred to Homeland Security, and I was working in Vermont. And I met a woman in Vermont named Thea Lewis, who ran a company called Queen City Ghost Walk. And she wrote haunted history books. And I just was immediately enamored with her, and I had to know more. And I asked if she would have lunch with me, and she did. And she taught me kind of how she got started, giving up her traditional career path to start, doing this sort of journey into the paranormal and history. And she introduced me to her publisher. And I, as any 20-something would do, dropped my stable job without a plan and jumped right into writing and starting my own company. And if I look back, I definitely could have planned that better. But it all worked out, in the end. And that's when I started writing. And I started writing about a town not far from where I grew up called Mystic, Connecticut, this beautiful seafaring town. And I wrote a tour for there as well, which we now have been operating since 2013, called Seaside Shadows, and Haunted Mystic came out in 2014. And that sort of introduced me to this world of writing. And then as the years went on with my research and going back to how I grew up and how my dad raised me, because he raised me on Civil War history, I ended up entering into the American Revolutionary War by nature of being in Connecticut. And then through sheer determination, made sure I entered into the Civil War world as well during the COVID years. And that's sort of where I've been ever since.
And there's so much to cover in both those wars. And
Yeah.
when I was young, it's a long time ago. I can't even tell you what decade I was in, 4th or 3rd grade, but it was mandatory in school at the time. It was called it was Virginia history, which of course has a lot to do with certain types of wars. I mean, if there's war, it's coming up and down the East Coast on this side. And the more and more I dug into it, it's kind of depressing in a way. So much sacrifice, so much going on.
Yeah.
And it kind of, if it doesn't hit you in the heart, nothing will.
Yeah.
On the other side of that, a lot of supernatural came out of that. And I had this friend, several friends actually, that were Civil War reenactors. And they've had experience where they go full out. They have the uniforms. Everything's as authentic as can get, where they're camping out there on the field, and they start hearing things that are not the people who are there, but something different. They've heard drums. They've seen soldiers go on the field and say, but that's not our people. Look at them. Where are we with that? How is this still happening?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So that's my most common. I'm looking at a battlefield right now as I talk to you out the window. My most common experiences on battlefields are those sounds of drumming, those sounds of gunfire, those shadows marching at certain times. The reason I believe this to be true, and the reason I believe this happens, is when we really talk about the American Civil War, we're talking about 750,000 casualties in 4 years. We're talking about immense loss of life, immense struggle, turmoil, face-to-face combat with friends, brothers, strangers looking at each other. We're talking about so much human emotion of fear, anger, all these things, sadness, grief. That has to go somewhere. And it's all just sitting here in these battle-strewn areas after these take place. So for me, what happens is almost, it's like a portal is almost created at these places where time will forever stand still in a sense. And it's when we go there, it's not that this ghost is saying, help me, I'm stuck. It's more like we are stepping foot into 1860 whatever all over again, and we are just this far away. That's why we hear them and see them. This imprint in time has been made, making that area, that portal, that thinness, that veil, where you can almost just see it happening when you go. And I think that's what a lot of these reenactors are experiencing as well, and why it's so vivid to them, because in a way it is real. It's just happening in that time.
Yes, and then see, it validates what we were talking about, because I mentioned about drums and I mentioned about hearing firearms in the background. You said the very same thing. There has to be some sort of an energy imprint, some sort of echo that every once in a while it bounces around. And eventually, at a certain time of night or a certain time of the year, you start hearing and seeing these same things.
Yes. I remember once I was visiting the wheat field at Gettysburg, which has been an area that's always spoken to me. I think a lot of Connecticut and Georgia soldiers fought there. Those are both sides of where my family's from. And there's just an energy there that's palpable to me. And in the wheat field once, I heard music and drumming, and it was this military march. I thought it was so real. I thought it was reenactors. And then it stopped, and then it came back, and I thought, okay, there are no reenactors. I put it on my phone and I recorded it, and you could hear it. What's funny is my husband was there and you couldn't hear it on his phone. You could only hear it on mine, which I thought was odd. And I marked the time that it was. There was no one else around. It was kind of rainy. A storm was coming in. And I went back to the wheat field and I was reading about it. The exact times we heard the two types of drumming are the times when the skirmish started in the wheat field and the time when it ended, meaning the battle entry march and the battle end march, right? And which is when they would have played those, and it played at that exact time, which kind of shows you that continuance of that happening, which I think is really neat.
And with it being baked in the cake, as they say, your interest in Civil War and Revolutionary War because of your father, right?
Yes.
Which book did you write first?
So that was almost pressure from my publishers. I wrote Revolutionary War Ghosts of Connecticut. I wanted to write about the Civil War, but my publishers were kind of like, Courtney, there were no Civil War battles in Connecticut. Let's try to think. And they led me toward the American Revolutionary War because New England does have a lot of battle sites and pivotal figures like Benedict Arnold grew up not far from where I grew up, Aaron Burr's family. I got to really become Nathan Hale, Benjamin Talmadge. I really just became immersed in this whole Revolutionary era by way of my publisher suggesting it, and spending the night in locations all over Connecticut, visiting all of these graves, investigating with different sites. And I fell in love with those stories and started giving boat tours up and down the river where Benedict Arnold had led his troops. And then it was during COVID that I couldn't operate my tours for a little while. And I started making videos because I was like, I don't really know how I'm going to reach out to people if I can't be there in person. So I started making these little YouTube videos that were like Cemetery Saturdays, Spooky Story Sundays. And I would just sort of share little tidbits of history. Well, before a Cemetery Saturday, I had a dream and these Civil War soldiers appeared in it. And they told me their grave was nearby and they were brothers. And I thought that was so odd. I didn't recognize them. And sure enough, I went to a local cemetery and I found the grave of these two brothers who had died the same age. They were like 21. And I shared their story on one of my video segments. And my dad had passed away and I kept thinking I really missed him and wanted to reconnect. And so what I did after those boys visited my dream and I was thinking about it, I said, I'm going to take this little pilgrimage down to all these battlefields and I'm going to research it and I'm going to write about these boys and I'm going to write about all these soldiers. And I started just driving down the East Coast, stopping at all the battlefields along the way, visited my family in Georgia, went back up, did it a few times, and then started writing my Civil War Ghosts books about Connecticut and Georgia for both sides of my family. And that's kind of what led me to that. And I have been so sucked into it that one of the towns that I found in my writing was a town called Chickamauga, Georgia. And as the second deadliest battle in the Civil War, second only to Gettysburg, the battle happened in Chickamauga 2.5 months after the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863. And this area was just so potent with activity and stories and legends, and it didn't have anyone here sharing it. So in 2025, I opened up a second tour branch, a sister company to my first tour branch in Chickamauga, so I can always keep that Civil War history going.
I'm amazed by the amount of work you've done so far, covering these wars. And I'm geeking out here, so don't mind me.
I geek out about history all the time.
Okay, perfect. The visit you received from those brothers.
Yes.
That is amazing. Is there have you been visited again since then? What else can you tell us about that?
Sure. So their names were William and George Brooks. And William and George Brooks were from Haddam, Connecticut. I was living in East Hampton, just over the bridge at the time. They did not have any descendants, no living relatives. So their story essentially would have gone into the mist if I had not had this dream. And in the dream, all I really got from them was their age and what army and where they were buried. And I went to this little cemetery and I found a monument built by their dad. I talked to them. I tried to get some EVPs. I saw that they had died actually in a Civil War prison camp in Georgia. One of them had, and then the other one had gotten out of there and then died on the journey home because he had been so sick. So on my pilgrimage, I went down to that prison camp called Andersonville. I found his registered number and I found his grave. And I went and did the same thing in Wilmington, North Carolina, where the other brother was. So I went and visited William and George. And I sat with them. I did some EVP sessions. I told them that they were remembered and that I would make sure they were remembered, and that they were loved. And I actually dedicated my entire Connecticut book series to them for putting me on that journey. Because one thing I learned when I was researching these books, more than I learned anything else by reading old letters, reading documents, is that these boys, and I call them boys because they were young, didn't fear death, but they feared being forgotten and they feared being left behind. And a lot of these boys were left behind in unmarked graves, far from home, no descendants. And I felt like they kind of called me on this mission to help them be not forgotten, to honor their stories, to show that their sacrifice mattered. I researched their regiment the most, the 16th Connecticut. I followed the 16th Connecticut footsteps. I let them sort of lead me through their journey of where they got. And I think they were a big part of why I got involved into these Civil War books. And I even remember I was standing in Andersonville prison. It was like 110 degrees in the middle of Georgia. And I was at William's grave and a song came on, and now it's one of my favorite bands. At the time, I had just really started listening to them more. And it was a band called Whiskey Myers, and it was a song called Bury My Bones. And it says, if I die young, basically bring me home. And that came on, and I could hear it from the car when I was standing at William's grave. And I just knew that was them trying to let me know that this was the path I had to be on. So it's weird and it's spiritual and it sounds kooky dooky, but that's why I do it for them.
No, it's not at all kooky dooky. I think it's amazing. You're doing something, because now I'm thinking to myself, you're only a phone call away, just in case another spirit wants to contact you. Now there's some sort of open line to maybe want to, not just those brothers, somebody else might visit you.
Yes.
And maybe you can tell their story.
And that's how I actually went through on these books. So I started with William and George. And a lot of people ask me, because in my books, I write about the battles. I write about the buildings, things like that, cemeteries, things people want to know. But in all of my book series, there's an entire section on people. And they can be generals, they can be officers, they can be privates, it doesn't matter to me, their ranking. And everyone says, how do you choose the people? I say, I don't. They choose me. So whether it's by dream, whether it's by I'm visiting a location and I'm drawn to something and I see a name, or whether it's by EVP. I had one soldier come to me at Antietam. I went to a grave and I was looking and I was like just naming names. And I said, is Daniel or is David Tarbix here? And someone said, it's Daniel. And I said, no, David Tarbix, it says on the monument. And the spirit said, it's Daniel on the spirit box. And I thought, okay. And sure enough, I looked it up. They misengraved his name erroneously on the monument. It was Daniel Tarbix. And I found out where he lived and I found his story. So they lead me to it. There was another gentleman. I accidentally found an old book of his and that he had written about a soldier whom he loved. And I found out about that man, and I found out they were one of the first openly gay soldier relationships in the Union Army, and that people supported them. I would never have known that. And then I was led to like a grad student who studied them, and he was the only person in the world who studied them. And so all these sort of things I felt like were them finding me. And I'll do the same thing on the Confederate side too. People always say to me, like, why do you like some of these Confederate guys? I'm like, I just have had an experience or a presence or a calling. There's a Confederate general I like named John Bell Hood, and he's controversial. Not everyone likes him. I like him. And one time I was sitting in this area of Chickamauga where he got shot. He didn't die, but he did have his leg amputated there. And I was reading his memoirs because I like to learn from them. And a lot of times they will document ghost stories too. But he was documenting how he did get shot in Chickamauga. And while I was reading that, I heard a voice say, hello. And my husband heard it. And he goes, did you just hear that, man? I said, I did. I didn't know you heard it too. And we looked around and we didn't see anyone hiking. And then I kept reading General Hood's memoirs. And in it, he says, I was shot around 2 p.m. And sure enough, when I heard that voice say hello, it was exactly 2 p.m. So just these ways that they find to connect with me and let me know that they're there is everything to me.
And in talking about finding their books and reading their books, have you been able to find anything else? Do you have any, I want to say the word memorabilia, but do you have any collectibles from those times that you own?
Oh, yeah. I have several regimental books that I get. So I go to used bookstores and I get the regimental books, the originals. I have the original printing of Ulysses S. Grant's memoirs, bound in leather, that were published and literally sold by Mark Twain, aka Samuel Clemens. I will sometimes order old letters, old Civil War era money, relics at stores, just anything that has energy. A lot of times I'll wear sometimes like old Civil War bullet necklaces, just things that I felt like that have been brought to me in an energy sense, and that continue to let them know that I'm here for them as well.
You're doing amazing work. And, you know, the more and more you dig into it, there's so much more that's been untold. And which brings me to the next question, that there's been hundreds of movies made by Hollywood about this time period.
Mm-hmm.
Out of all those movies, which one sticks out the best to you that seems to be the more accurate?
Accurate is hard. There is a movie about the 54th Massachusetts, and it has, why can't I think of his real name? I just keep thinking of him as Ferris Bueller. But it has, what's his name is in it? And Denzel Washington and all these people. And it's about the 54th Massachusetts. And it's called Glory. And that movie is probably one of the more historically accurate. I am a nerd for different things. Like, I do like Gods and Generals in Gettysburg. There's a lot of over dramatization. However, there's also great insight into some of these people. And they do a very good job at humanizing people like Joshua Chamberlain or Stonewall Jackson in a way you wouldn't normally get to see. So I do think that there are these really great elements there that are exposed. And I do think Gone with the Wind does show a really good insight into Georgia during the Civil War and the perspective of a lot of people in Georgia, the fear they had during the Battle of Atlanta campaign. There's like scenes where they're sort of fleeing the area. The city's on fire. They're getting casualty lists. They're very confused. And I think for that period of time, it does actually kind of grasp what probably was happening, especially because it was made closer to the era where people would have remembered to be able to tell Margaret Mitchell. She's able to sort of exemplify that in the book and then further when the film is made.
And to save you the phone call for you calling me at 3 a.m, Matthew Broderick, because it would have popped at you.
Oh my gosh, yes, of course. I knew it was like this very obvious name, and I'm like, I can tell you history names all day long, and I'm like, and Ferris Bueller.
Yeah, I'm so bad with names. The reason his little face kept popping up, and I'm like, and I kept going back. I think Cameron. Okay, Cameron. They crashed the car through the windows. Okay, I'm thinking he was also in Godzilla. Oh, Matthew Broderick. So,
yes, thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, but he's in a movie, I believe it's called Glory. And, you know, that does show too. I mean, because this is when we're having, again, like the first Black soldiers in the Civil War and what happened to them. And it's really great and probably one of the more accurate ones.
Yeah, that was one of the ones they showed us in high school during one of the history classes. They showed us Glory. Yeah.
Really?
It was also one of the best times when you were in school, even before they had they showed the film strip, the reel to reels, and then they become the VHS. So I'm really dating myself here, but now
I get it. I mean, I just said Gone with the Winds, like casually and I think I recently, again, I'm a nerd, but I like went to a movie theater a year or two ago for like the 75th anniversary of Gone with the Wind or something like that. So
wow, unbelievable. Time flies by. 75 years already. It feels like it was just almost yesterday, because even by my time it was kind of old. Now that we're in 2026, I know 25 is very busy for you. What are you going to be doing in 2026? You got more book signings? I know that I'm sure you have books in the work.
Yes. So I'm working on a couple of books right now. Well, I kind of have 3 in my pipeline. One is about a cemetery and mystic. One is about Chickamauga, because I want to really go more in depth on haunted Chickamauga in regards to the battle, but as well as the Trail of Tears has a lot of history as well in this town. And I think those two things together just bring such a rich and tragic history that deserves to be written about. And then I'm also working on Civil War Ghosts of Maryland, because I am solely working on my Civil War Ghost series. I wanted to go state by state. I go to Sharpsburg, Maryland a lot, where the Battle of Antietam was. And they said, well, you did a Union state and a Confederate state. It's time for a split state, which Maryland was split during the war. So they're next on my roster. I am going to be doing some speaking engagements at the Longstreet Society in Gainesville, Georgia next year, as well as some other ones in Beaufort, Georgia that someone's working on for me. I'm trying to get an event set up in Savannah, as well as some here in Chickamauga. And then up in Rhode Island and Connecticut, there's some libraries that should be announcing events next year as well.
Excellent. And now for our friends, listeners that want to learn more about you, where are you going to be, and how to purchase your books, where can they find out?
Sure. So you can visit my website, CourtneyMcInvale.com. I'm the one updating it. So when it's outdated, that's my fault. You can always send me an email on there. You can also visit SeasideShadows.com and SouthernShadows.com. I'll usually advertise my speaking engagements on those social media channels as well. So you can follow them on, Facebook, Instagram, all the good stuff. I'm trying to be better at TikTok, but no promises. Maybe this will be my 2026 will be my year to be better at social media. But you can absolutely go to Seaside Shadows or Southern Shadows, follow on there. You'll see the engagements listed there as well as the books.
Excellent. And I know that once the next series of books come out, we'll bring you right back on the show.
I would love that. That would be fabulous.
Thank you, my friend.
On the next episode of Let's Find Out with Diego.
To the point that Teddy Roosevelt got wind of it, and he's like, what? Now, and the thing about Teddy Roosevelt is, he was big on big conservative for nature. He brought us to national parks. He did a lot of. He was also an avid hunter, and he had belief in. He didn't call it Bigfoot, but wild man, which was his description was Bigfoot. He also believed in the Ozark Howler. He he wrote about these, and he actually in his journal mentioned the snallygaster because he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna hunt."
Die, monster! Your end is near.
And he and his son Kermit, who was his son, but also his hunting buddy. They are the ones who, when he went to Africa, but they had planned to come to the Middletown Valley to go up on South Mountain, hunt this thing down and kill it.
Copyright Diego the Podcaster. All content for Let's Find Out is the property of Diego the Podcaster and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, Diego the Podcaster, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out with Diego is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.